Welcome to Fire Engineering's Training Minutes. I'm Rick George, and this is segment number 5 in a 6 series of resiliency. So number 5, we're going to talk about mindfulness, and we're going to talk about mental rehearsal. I'm going to attack mental rehearsal first. Mental rehearsal is one of those things that you rehearse in your head. It often happens throughout life. I had to mentally rehearse when I proposed to my wife. I had to mentally rehearse when I went into court for my divorce. There's a lot of things that I've mentally rehearsed for, but I never purposefully knew what I was doing. In the fire service, it's very big. And the reason that it's very big is because when I struggle in some aspects, I have to be able to work some things out. So when I work things out, what I mean by that is if I'm struggling with keeping my mask on my face and not ripping it off because I have anxiety, I have to find a nice quiet place. This is how you set it up. You find a nice quiet place, you sit down, you relax. You use breathing that we talked about in segment number 2, which is the breathing segment. And we put the breathing in there and we slow everything down and relax. And then we start thinking about what we're doing. The mental rehearsal has to do with me going into something like let's use an SCBA confidence maze, okay, which you'll see in segment number 6. So we're going into an SCBA confidence drill, and I could feel my heart rate increasing. I could taste the sweat coming off of I could taste the salt coming in off of my sweat. I can hear my breathing through my SCBA, the weight as I'm going through. I can feel my anxiety going up because it's blacked out. I can't see anything. So I'm going through and I'm struggling with this. I'm including all of the senses. So in my mental rehearsal, when I'm visualizing all of this, but it goes back to what we talked about in segment number 1 with the hypervigilance and the self-talk. So what is it that I'm telling myself? Oh, it's hot. I'm not going to succeed. I'm scared. What's wrong with me? All this negative self-talk. And what I want to do is I want to get away from all that, and I want to go to the coping, which is 1, you're a paid professional. You've been trained as a professional. You have done this and accomplished it before. You have been trained by the best in the business. You have the capability of pulling it off. So telling myself those positive things helps build my resiliency level. Now, in this drill, this mental rehearsal drill, should not take more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes tops. So you see yourself going into the drill. You've got all your gear on. You include all of the senses. You find yourself going through it, through the tunnel, through the tight spaces, through the open spaces, the parts where you go into a dead end and you got to back out. There's no reason to be anxious about any of it. It's in the way that you look at it, and that's the purpose for mental rehearsal. So it's a personal challenge. So you're just challenging yourself. You make a game out of it instead of something that's so critical. And when you do that, you empower yourself and you give yourself the permission to go ahead and make mistakes and correct them on the fly. This helps improve rapid pattern recognition and recognized prime decision making as well. So all of this learning process, if you learn to lean into your failures, you can take your weaknesses and develop into strengths by using mental rehearsal. So in the mental rehearsal, you get through this whole thing. It takes 5 minutes. The only thing that you have to do in a mental rehearsal has to end in a successful ending. Has to be successful. Otherwise, why bother doing it? So where does all this take us? All of this takes us into the way that we think. So the brain waves that are developed while you're doing all of this is the beta waves and the alpha waves and the theta waves. So somewhere in there, the mind is its most suggestive. It can't distinguish between reality and fiction. Okay, so when I'm creating something like this and I've used my breathing to slow myself down and I get in that nice smooth spot, my brain is taking this as a mental repetition. And the more mental reps that you have when you physically do it, your mind will have already been there and you will be more comfortable. So you have to combine all of these things. And the beauty about mental repetition is you don't have to have gear. You don't have to have tools. You don't have to have anything. You just have to have the diligence, the temperance to be able to sit down and assign times during the day to be able to do this. If you want to be good, if you want to be that high-speed, low-drag firefighter, these are the things that you do. These are the things that are taught to the United States Navy SEALs during their BUDS program. That's what's taught to the Army Rangers. This is taught in commercial aviation. They even teach it in corporate America. All of these tools are being incorporated everywhere, including law enforcement, and the fire service is quickly catching on. Thank you for joining us in another segment of Fire Engineering's Training Minutes. I'm Rick George. Welcome to Fire Engineering's Training Minutes. My name's Rick George, and today we're going to cover number 5 in 6 series of videos on resiliency. Today will be on mental rehearsal and mindfulness. Very quickly, mental rehearsal takes about 5 minutes. You find yourself in a nice quiet place. You pick a subject out. The subject will be something that you perceive as a weakness. Let's say it's search and rescue. So you find yourself doing search and rescue in full gear. You include all the senses. There's 5 of them, all 5 senses, and you try to make it as realistic as possible. It takes 5 minutes, has a successful outcome, and you're good. You try to increase the degree of difficulty and the length of the mental rehearsal as you get more and more proficient at it. What happens sometimes when you try to focus on things is your mind has a tendency of wandering. When you catch yourself wandering and be able to pull it back, that act is actually called mindfulness. And that act of mindfulness can purposefully be trained, and it's part of what you're doing when you do mental rehearsals. Mindfulness has been studied by University of Massachusetts. It helps improve memory, it helps improve focus, and it also thickens the brain matter. The reason for that is for neuroplasticity. All of these things play into the hypervigilance that we spoke about in section 1. And in section 6, we're going to incorporate all of that along with some other things like body positioning and breathing. I hope you've enjoyed this segment. Thank you for joining Fire Engineering's Training Minutes. My name is Rick George.